Most people think bourbon is just one thing, a brown spirit that comes from Kentucky, smells like vanilla, and gets poured into an old-fashioned. That is the entire mental model for millions of drinkers. And it is not wrong exactly, it is just wildly incomplete. Because bourbon is not one thing, it is a family of spirits with distinct styles, legal definitions, and production methods that create genuinely different drinking experiences. The problem is that nobody explains the differences clearly. You walk into a liquor store, you see 40 bottles with the word bourbon on the label, and you have no framework for understanding why one costs $18 and another costs $200. Today we are fixing that. Every major type of bourbon, what makes each one different, what to actually buy, and where the industry is trying to confuse you. Let us start at the foundation. Before any style distinctions matter, bourbon has to clear a set of legal hurdles. Federal law, not marketing, defines what can call itself bourbon. It has to be made in the United States from a grain mixture that is at least 51% corn. It has to be distilled to no more than 160 proof and entered into the barrel at no more than 125 proof. The barrel itself must be a new charred oak container, and it has to be bottled at no less than 80 proof. That is it. No age requirement beyond a very short minimum for straight bourbon, which we will get to. No geographic requirement beyond being made in America, which surprises most people who assume Kentucky is a legal prerequisite. It is not. Kentucky just produces 95% of the world's supply because the climate, the limestone filtered water, and frankly the history all point in that direction. So within those rules, how do you get dramatically different styles of bourbon? It comes down to four things: the mash bill, the yeast, the barrel, and time. And each of those four variables creates a different category of bourbon worth understanding. The first distinction that actually matters is the mash bill. Every bourbon starts with at least 51% corn. What fills the remaining percentage defines the flavor profile before a single drop hits a barrel. Rye is the most common secondary grain, and it is what most people picture when they imagine classic bourbon. A high rye mash bill, something above 18% rye, gives you spice, pepper, and a dry finish. Four Roses is famous for playing with rye content. Their single barrel expressions lean into that grain-forward character in a way that makes the spice the whole point. Wheated bourbon swaps the rye for wheat as the secondary grain. The result is dramatically softer, rounder, and sweeter. Maker's Mark built its entire identity on wheat. So did the Van Winkle family, which is why Pappy Van Winkle and its relative W.L. Weller developed that devoted following. People who say they do not like bourbon often find they love wheated bourbon because the sharp rye edge is gone. High corn bourbon pushes the corn content way past the minimum, sometimes into the 80s or 90% range. Mellow corn is the obvious example. More corn means more sweetness, less complexity, and a softer spirit overall. Malt-forward bourbon uses a higher percentage of malted barley than typical recipes. It is the least common style in the mainstream market, but it is growing as craft distillers look for ways to differentiate themselves. The second major category is bottled in bond. This one has a specific legal meaning, and it is important because it was actually created to protect consumers, not to market premium products. The Bottled in Bond Act of 1897 established the first federal consumer protection standard for American spirits. To carry that designation, the bourbon has to be made at a single distillery in a single distilling season, aged at least 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse, and bottled at exactly 100 proof. Nothing more, nothing less. At a time when producers were adulterating whiskey with everything from tobacco to iodine, bottled in bond was the government's way of telling drinkers this one is real. Today, the label means the same thing legally, but it has taken on a different cultural weight. Evan Williams Bottled in Bond costs about $20. Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond is a sought-after allocated release. Same rules, completely different market positioning. The designation itself tells you about production standards. The price tells you about brand power and scarcity. Learn to separate those two things. The third style worth understanding is single barrel. This one is exactly what it sounds like. Every bottle comes from one individual barrel rather than a blend of multiple barrels. Why does that matter? Because no two barrels age identically. A barrel on the top floor of a Kentucky warehouse experiences dramatic temperature swings, pushing whiskey deeper into the wood during summer and pulling it back during winter. A barrel on the bottom floor barely moves. The results can be astonishing, different even from barrels that started with identical liquid. Single barrel bottlings carry a barrel number and sometimes a warehouse and floor designation for that reason. When you buy a bottle of Four Roses single barrel or a Buffalo Trace single barrel store pick, you are buying one specific barrel's story. Some are extraordinary, some are underwhelming. That variability is the point. It is the opposite of blended consistency, and serious bourbon drinkers chase it specifically for that reason. Small batch sits on the other side of that coin. There is no legal definition for small batch in the bourbon world, which means every producer gets to decide what the term means for them. Knob Creek calls its core expression small batch. Booker's calls itself small batch. Maker's Mark calls itself small batch. What they all mean, loosely, is that a limited number of barrels were selected and blended together to create the final product rather than dumping everything into a massive industrial vat. In practice, small batch usually signals more careful barrel selection and a higher quality floor than a standard release. But because the term is legally meaningless, you cannot rely on it alone. Look at the proof and the production specs alongside the small batch label rather than treating the words themselves as a quality guarantee. Barrel-proof bourbon, sometimes called cask strength, skips the dilution step that most producers use before bottling. Standard bourbon gets water added to bring it down to somewhere around 40 to 46% alcohol. Barrel proof comes out of the cask and goes straight into the bottle. That can mean anything from 110 proof up to the mid-120s or even higher depending on the barrel. The flavors are more concentrated, the finish lasts longer, and you get to add your own water to find the dilution that works for your palate. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof is the bottle that converted a generation of drinkers who thought they did not want high-proof bourbon. Booker's is the one that has been doing it the longest and most consistently. The warning here is simple. Do not underestimate the proof. Barrel-proof bourbon is not just stronger. It is a different sensory experience that rewards patience in small sips. Then there is straight bourbon, which sounds like a style but is actually a legal age designation. Straight bourbon must be aged at least 2 years in new charred oak. If it is aged less than 4 years, the age must be stated on the label. If it carries no age statement and says straight, you can assume it is at least 4 years old. Most of the serious bottles in the market are straight bourbon. It is the baseline expectation for anything above entry level. Finally, there is the Tennessee whiskey question that bourbon drinkers argue about constantly. Technically, Tennessee whiskey follows most of the same rules as bourbon. The difference is the Lincoln County process, where the spirit is filtered through maple charcoal before going into the barrel. Jack Daniels and George Dickel both do this. Tennessee legally requires it for anything labeled Tennessee whiskey. Whether that makes it bourbon is a debate that has gone on for decades. The short answer is that Tennessee whiskey producers generally prefer their own designation, and the legal framework supports that distinction even though the production is nearly identical in every other way. So where does that leave you when you are standing in front of a shelf trying to make a decision? Start with the mash bill. If you like spice and dryness, reach for a high rye expression. If you want something soft and approachable, go wheated. From there, decide whether you want consistency or character. A blend of barrels gives you reliability. A single barrel gives you surprise. Then look at the proof. 80 proof is fine for cocktails. Above 100 is where sipping starts getting interesting. Barrel proof is where things get genuinely exciting and occasionally genuinely intense. The bourbon category is bigger and more varied than most people realize, and the industry does not always make it easy to navigate. Terms like small batch and premium get thrown around without meaning. Allocated bottles get treated as automatically superior regardless of what is inside them. The truth is that a $20 bottled-in bond can outperform a $100 allocated release in a blind tasting. That happens regularly. The framework that actually protects your money is understanding what the legal designations mean, what the mash bill does to flavor, and what the proof tells you about intensity. Everything else is marketing. Get those 3 things right, and you will never buy a disappointing bottle of bourbon again. And there you have it. You're a bourbon pro now. Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. Until then, see you in the next video.